Cracking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck. 7 years. That's a long time to be stuck with bad luck. In fact, if you've ever broken a mirror, then you're probably feeling it right now. But how did we get this curse? Why exactly should breaking a mirror bring about such a long stretch of misery? How much damage can 7 years of bad luck actually do? The wind was whipping through London that night, rain lashing against the windows of the antique shop. A young woman hurried around the cluttered store, desperately searching for something, anything she could use as a gift for her boyfriend. Her hands brushed against glass. Startled, she looked up and found herself staring into a dusty mirror. The girl reached out, her fingers grazing the ornate frame. Suddenly, the mirror wobbled, then crashed to the ground. She gasped, stumbling back as shards rained down around her. Dazed, she surveyed the damage, each fragment reflecting the broken pieces of her heart. She had broken the most important rule in the universe. Now she would have to endure 7 years of horrible, horrible luck. That was just a normal day at the office for me. So let's talk about the science behind this story. Well, first, I did not break the mirror. It was knocked over by a rogue Lego while filming, which somehow ended up underneath the shelf. Second, mirrors don't actually cause bad luck. In fact, they don't cause any luck at all. Good, bad, whatever happens to you after breaking one isn't because of the mirror, but simply a result of chance. But why do so many people swear by this superstition? To answer that, we're going to have to go way back, like ancient Rome, Greece, and Egypt way back. All those cultures believed that when you broke a mirror, you were putting your soul in danger. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but stick with me here. Back in those days, people didn't have smartphones to reflect their selfies or security cameras to monitor their every move. They had mirrors, though, which might have been made of polished metal or, like regular old glass. They used them to comb their hair, put on makeup, basically everything we do today except record TikTok dances. And they believed that these mirrors were portals to the soul. Now, some of this likely came from the fact that mirrors are shiny and reflective, which made them seem magical to our primitive ancestors. After all, we've only started figuring out what magic is like in the last few centuries. But we also tended to believe that there was some kind of spirit within us that left our body when we died. This is called a soul theory. And while science has moved on from that idea, psychology still recognizes that we experience ourselves as having an inner self, even if it doesn't literally leave our bodies. Today, that inner self manifests in our thoughts, emotions, memories, and personality. We call it the mind. The ancient Greeks believed that the psyche, the equivalent of the mind, resided in the heart. The Romans thought it was the liver, but Egyptians thought it was reflected in the eyes. Those peepers were the windows to the soul. So it wasn't too much of a stretch for them to believe that when they looked into a mirror, they were looking into their very souls. Which brings us back to that fateful day when Eve apparently broke a mirror in the Garden of Eden and brought about 7 generations of evil upon mankind. Or maybe that happened after she took a bite of the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Wait, no, that was Adam. Was it? No, they both did. Regardless, in order to understand why mirror breaking supposedly causes so much chaos, we need to look at another classic piece of folklore. Snow White, after her wicked stepmother, the queen, ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the woods and kill her. He decided to spare her life. Instead, he took her to a cottage inhabited by 7 dwarfs. And in this version of the fairy tale, it was the queen who was obsessed with her looks. She demanded that her magic mirror on the wall tell her who was the fairest of them all. And the mirror always told the truth. For 7 years, it proclaimed the queen was the fairest until Snow White became a woman and took the top spot. Enraged, the queen donned a disguise and went to the dwarf's cottage where she tricked Snow White into eating a poisoned apple, which put her into a death-like slumber. What does any of this mean? Well, for starters, apparently the number 7 has been associated with magic and witchcraft for thousands of years. In fact, according to a survey of world religions conducted in 2004, more than half of the cultures included the 7 in some form of myth or legend. So it makes sense that the idea of 7 years of bad luck got attached to breaking a mirror. Plus, according to psychologists, this amount of time is long enough for coincidences to seem like patterns. In other words, say you broke a mirror today and felt pretty bad about it because you knew the whole 7 years thing. Well, nothing would happen today, tomorrow, next week, or next month. But fast forward 5 years and you find yourself single again. You lost your job and your car broke down for the 3rd time that week. At this point, you might start thinking that breaking the mirror really did cause all this trouble. Of course, this is silly since it was just a coincidence that you lost your job on the 5th anniversary of the mirror breaking. But sometimes coincidences can seem like a lot more than just random chance. This is called the law of small numbers. Essentially, we're really bad at guessing what will happen when dealing with a small sample size. Like if someone won the lottery 3 times in a row, we'd be pretty sure they were cheating. But if 3 people out of 300 million win, we think they were just lucky. In terms of the mirror curse, if nothing happens after you break one, you might think that the 7 years of bad luck you heard about were totally bogus. But once you run into a couple of speed bumps, like getting sick or spilling coffee on your white shoes, well, you might start wondering if the superstition is true. Of course, by the time you reach the 7-year mark, you'll probably realize it was just a coincidence. But by then, you may have already convinced yourself that the curse was real. This type of thinking is known as confirmation bias. Basically, we tend to notice and remember things that confirm what we already think and ignore the stuff that disproves it. It's the reason why you might keep overthinking a relationship long after your friends have given up on trying to help. And it's also why the mirror curse persists to this day. We hear a story about someone who broke a mirror and suffered terrible fate, and we think, maybe it's best to stay away from mirrors. Then, when something bad happens to us after breaking one, we think, see, I told you so. Now, confirmation bias alone doesn't explain why people believed in the curse to begin with. There had to be some initial spark, something that made people think that mirrors were more than just pieces of glass. And according to psychologist David Matsumoto, that spark might have come from our tendency to anthropomorphize, meaning we often assign human qualities to non-human things. Think of how we give teddy bears personalities or imagine our cars are gossiping to each other in the parking lot. Basically, humans are kind of weird like that. So when we look in the mirror and see ourselves staring back, it's not surprising that we think there's some kind of being on the other side, especially since we already had an idea that our souls could leave our bodies. Looking in the mirror meant we could see our reflections and therefore our souls. But occasionally those reflections looked different. Sometimes people saw extra limbs or strange faces staring back at them. This is because mirrors don't bend light in the same way our eyes do. So, seeing an accurate reflection requires a little extra brain power. Since our brains weren't equipped to deal with this, we often interpreted the images in mirrors as distorted versions of ourselves. And since we believed that the mirror showed our souls, we also believed it could show us what our souls would look like in the future. And that's how we got fortune-telling mirrors. The ancient Romans used them to see the future, but often ended up with visions of hairy wild men instead. The Scylla, an ancient tribe from the island of Crete, consulted mirrors to gain insight into their problems. And in China, young girls would stare into a basin of water to predict their futures. According to legend, one girl saw the face of an old woman peering back at her. Startled, she dropped the basin, which shattered. She immediately fell ill and died soon after. That's pretty dark. It wasn't until the Middle Ages that mirrors began showing clear reflections thanks to advances in glass making. But by then, the damage was done. People were already scared of mirrors. And one look at a funhouse mirror is enough to see why. We love them, but distortion plus mirrors equals scary. To be fair, mirrors have other symbolic meanings too. For example, they can represent vanity. After all, Snow White's stepmother was vain and narcissistic. Mirrors can also symbolize hidden things like the saying, "Looking is believing," or they can represent duality. If we have good and evil inside of us, then the mirror reflects both sides of ourselves. This is why some people believe that after breaking a mirror, they must jump over the shards to avoid whatever misfortune is coming. Jumping symbolizes clearing the slate and starting fresh. Of course, these superstitions are just stories passed down from generation to generation. There's no real proof that mirrors reflect our souls or that they can predict the future. If you ask me, the only thing mirrors reflect is whatever is placed in front of them. But what do you think? Do you believe in mirror curses, or is it just fear-feeding folklore? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching.